Today's Old Testament reading comes from Genesis chapter 24, pretty much the whole chapter. It shows another strong woman who follows Sarah to continue the lineage. With the death of Sarah, Isaac was grieving. Some claim that Abraham remarried and had another family, which would make Isaac a little more isolated and alone. He is somewhere between the ages of 37 and 40 years old, still unmarried, and Abraham doesn't want his son to marry a Canaanite woman who would bring pagan type of worship, worshiping idols and a different way of life. But he would like for his son to be married and have a family of his own. Abraham instructs his servant to go find Isaac a wife from among his own people. The servant, whom some have named Eliezer, is concerned that no woman would be willing to follow him with the promise of marriage to an unknown man. Sight unseen. Who would want that? Shouldn't he take Isaac with him? But Abraham tells him not to take Isaac. He also reassured the servant that he would not hold it against him if he was unsuccessful in this mission. So Eliezer set off to Nabar with 10 camels and an array of gifts for the future bride's family. He prayed that Abraham's God would guide them to the right young woman, and that his journey would be a success. It was evening when he arrived, so some women were drawing water from the well. Rebekah gave him water and offered to water all 10 of his camels until they were satisfied. That would have been about 50 liters of water to draw and to pour. Due to her care of these animals, Rebekah was named the saint of environmentalists. After she cared for the animals, Eliezer gave her a nose ring weighing about half of a shekel and 2 bracelets weighing 10 gold shekels, and asked her to check with her parents if he could lodge with them that night. She responded that they would provide care for the animals, and he would have a place to stay that night. Eliezer gave thanks to God. Rebekah ran home to inform her parents of all that had occurred. When her brother Laban saw the ring and the bracelets, he ran out to welcome this servant and proceeded to feed and house the camels. Food was prepared and offered, and Eliezer then shared that, he needed to at least relay the message that was sent before he ate. He identified himself as a servant of Abraham and Sarah, who had found good fortune with wealth, livestock, and a son who now needed a wife from within the family tradition. God had answered his prayers thus far by revealing Rebekah, and he's hoping that God will answer his prayers again if the family will agree to Rebekah's marriage to Isaac. Laban and his father agreed and provided Rebekah with a nurse to accompany her and a blessing as she departed with Eliezer. Isaac was working in the fields as Rebekah and Eliezer arrived. When Rebekah saw Isaac, she slipped quickly from the camel and asked the servant who the man was. When she heard it was her groom, she covered herself with a veil, which is where some claim we get the tradition of a wedding veil. When Isaac took her into Sarah's tent, she became his beloved wife, and he was comforted after his mother's death. According to the Jewish commentator Rashi, Rebekah is credited to restoring the 3 miracles of Sarah's tent when she entered it. They were, first of all, a lamp burnt in the tent from Shabbat Eve to Shabbat Eve. Secondly, a blessing of dough. And third, a cloud hovered over her tent, signifying the divine presence. The story speaks not only to the dynamic and proactive characteristics of Sarah and Rebekah, but also to God's fidelity to the promises that God made to these women, her agents of progeny. They are women who are courageous, proactive, trustworthy, kind. So there's also the story of that Abraham had handed over Sarah to one of the Canaanite kings, saying that she was his sister because he was afraid. And Isaac follows in his father's footsteps by doing the same with Rebekah. The difference is the Canaanite king, realized that when he saw Rebekah and Isaac embraced, that maybe that wasn't his sister after all. So it was on his part that Rebekah was spared. But both of the men are rather cowardly, whereas the women are rather courageous and kind. They are very capable of taking care of the home front, but they also are leaders in many ways. And as I say, they are the ones who actually bring the promise of God to fruition through the children that they bear. So hopefully this is helpful for all of you to think about and to know that there were strong women back in biblical times.